Hello, everyone. It's the Sky Priestess. I am wondering whether or not my fridge is making too much noise. So let me know if it is, and I can go and pop over and turn that off. So, no, I just wanted to do a quick impromptu check in because there's been a lot happening collectively, personally in this space, and some of you are wondering like, what's going on? Yes, naturally, I cover all of this in the Tier 23 program, but as I promised you, I will also be, sharing the stuff that matters in this space as well, because the work ain't just about getting paid, if you know what I mean. It is also about keeping people informed. So, one of the things that has happened recently is, of course, and the Jupiter Pluto conjunction. So that's a really really big deal. And it's the kind of energy that's really, unleashed a lot in the collective for all of us. And it's been making waves and so on and so forth. But that's not what's been the most recent happening. So, what's been really for me directly, what's been very, very activating is, of course, the fact that Mars is doing a thing in the sky, and I'm looking behind this a little bit just to look at my computer. Let me see if I can move my tripod tractor. And it's really making people think about their truths and who they are in the world, which is why intellectually I know this, astrologically I know this, but you still have to experience it as a human being because no one's immune to it. Mars is in Aries and is trining the great attractor, and that's, as you know, that's where my Saturn is. So, people have been trying to like push and pull at me and tear me apart a little bit, but that doesn't work. I'm still here. I know that some of you get worried when you see me getting into these on YouTube, or it used to be Facebook, but don't worry, in the sense that I'm one of those people who has had to learn how to deal with the bullshit for years, and I am a master of taking that and making that into healthy fertilizer. So that's what's been happening. That's what's been going on. And there's more coming. I mean, this new moon in Scorpio that we are just a few hours away from is also extraordinarily potent. I mean, it's a really, really powerful alignment. It's a really potent alignment. And, it's something that I also wanted to talk about today. I didn't really want to make this about one thing, but about many things, because that's just kind of the way I roll. And you know what? I'm not even a Gemini. I dislike having just one single focus of things, just because reality is always a lot more layered. It's always a lot more multi-tiered. So what I want to talk to you about in terms of this new moon in Scorpio is that it's extraordinarily potent. It's also very volatile. It's also very, very unpredictable. And the reason why it's so unpredictable is as follows. And I'm just drawing up my writings for the last year 23 installment, which was 6,000 words. My tier 23 people love the intensity, but there's always a lot for them to think about. Now, the new moon is at 23 degrees of Scorpio. It's actually a triple yod. So a yod is a finger of fate. It's made up of a sextile and two long inconjuncts. All right. And that's what creates this big tapering finger effect. And, very idealistic astrologers call it the path of service from God. I just see it as karma. So the sun in Scorpio is sextile Jupiter at 23 degrees Capricorn. Pluto is nearby. And the yod is actually activated at 23 degrees Gemini. So it's got Scorpio, Cap, and what's activating it is whatever is at 23 degrees of Gemini. That's the first yod. That's where you got Orion, thereabouts, and the North Node as well. And Orion is where you get this very aggressive, headstrong energy. Of course, there are other aspects to it. Unfortunately, I've seen facilitators and people channeling that energy also forget that it can bring this very, it's almost like an intellectual club to the head where someone wants to go, this is me, this is it. I mean, I'm all for people, having views and having opinions, but sometimes there is an energy of violence to that, which is what Orion is bringing through at this time. So that's one of the yods. Another yod is Scorpio, the sun in Scorpio in conjunct Eris in Aries. So Aries is at 23 degrees of Aries, and there is a alarm going off. Going on. Yes, that's being taken care of. So the sun in Scorpio is in conjunct Aries at 23 degrees of Aries, and that has another sort of yod points 23 Gemini or 23 Virgo, with Eros nearby at 27. So we see the sun, Aries, Orion, the North Node, and Eros all coming together to create this triplicate alignment. And when you've got three intersecting yods, the only thing that you can tell someone is that it's very unpredictable. And that's more unpredictable than usual because the moment you have a single intention or impulse going somewhere, that's going to be ricocheting off the chart in many, many, many other ways. So if you've got anything near that 23-degree point, pay attention and see what comes. I mean, for me, I've got a bunch of stuff in Sagittarius, which is why people keep prodding me. And I'm like, why, man? Why? I'm just sitting here. What I find, and this is something that I know is always a little bit risky to talk about, is that I have found that a lot of the resistance to my work does not come from, people of African descent. Yes, I get into fight with Caucasian trolls over white supremacy and privilege. That's one side of things. But more often than not, the people who tend to get the most triggered and dismissive of what I do here are other Indians. They tend to be other North Indians, I have to say, because there is a North-South racial divide, and I represent the Dravidian line, who I am and my identity and my face. But I find that each time these alignments come up, because I was like really racking my head, what is going on here? Now, for those of you who know anything about my journey, you know that I've spent many years researching and living in and really just trying to understand my own relationship with India and Hinduism and whatnot. And, I finally found after journeying for a very long time, because for me, this was always the path, even as a kid. I didn't suddenly decide one day I was going to do this, it was just always there. And I've done the kind of work which is not just about praying, but it's also about ethnographic research, political research, living there, feeling the place, being there, in and out. And I just found that it didn't work for me. Because the deeper I looked, especially, I mean, there are some very, very key exceptions, for example, the Srividya tradition. But generally speaking, I found that the energetic architecture of Hinduism did not suit what I was doing. And to be honest, if you keep digging in any religious system, you're going to find that. Most of the time, I keep my mouth shut on that. Just because it's like, you know what, I don't want to be insulting people. I don't want to be, poking holes, taking pot shots at anything. But it keeps coming after me, Each time it's like, this is how I see all of these triggerings to my work. Most of the time, this is where I get the biggest opposition. It's either from Indian people who are very triggered by the fact I'm dark skinned and have an international audience, or it's by people who get triggered by the fact I have a doctorate and I am proud of it. 111,000 words. I didn't even try for that. It just happened. And it's people who are just, they're wanting to defend Vedic astrology, or it's people who want to have that very hierarchical view. I mean, this is actually what I wanted to talk about. And a lot of the times I don't, because like I said, I'm very sensitive to this. But because, a lot of people are also turning to it from the West, white people, people of African descent, because they're thinking of it as this exoticized, orientalized other. And, as someone who's lived it and looked at its limitations, I just don't sit with that. In fact, recently I had to say no to a client whom I adore, such a sweet, beautiful person. But she had started working with certain energies that literally did not want me anywhere near them. They were like, no, 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 no. And I was like, I'm sorry, I can't do anything. But I find this resistance very much stronger than usual. I mean, for context, and I'm going to talk about it. So if you don't like it, you don't like it. My PhD was on the Indian Parliament, and it was on the intersection of ritual and ceremony and gender and political space and micro-sociological dramaturgy and the ethnographic method and all of those big ass words. But I kind of just, I couldn't do it. I couldn't look at a religious system and spiritual worldview that somehow managed to reconcile itself to extremes of patriarchy. And, it's just like in a land of so many thousand goddesses, how are you still aborting female fetuses? How are you still needing to be told why you can't devalue women? And there's a big gap, there's a really big gap between the two. So it's like for me, one of the biggest shifts in my life was walking out of that cultural context. I used to be someone who prayed, you could almost call it obsessively, but it was my life, I was someone who went to every major site of worship that I could go to, who sincerely opened her heart out, who kept looking for guidance. And it just didn't work for me because anytime I went there, there was a box. So, I mean, even in terms of the astrology side of things, people are looking at Vedic astrology as, it's the alternative because the Western system's not good enough. First of all, Western is not white. You got to understand this came from the Chaldean system, from Chaldean times. That's not the equivalent there. And there are methods in astrological analysis that are not being used by Western astrology, which honestly, when you use them, that gap and that missing part in what consciousness seekers are looking for at this time gets very easily filled. You just actually need to use the tools that you have. So instead of that, people are turning to Vedic astrology because they feel like it's not working for them, and I can understand why. But I am someone who grew up with it, and it just never worked for me. We had the right time, we had the right everything, and each time someone would try to read my chart, it always sounded like bullshit. And then we even went to this place where they kind of have prophecies. They have these palm leaves. They call them olechodis in Tamil Nadu. And we went there, and I actually went there as a child, and they were, they were very surprised that they got my prophecy, so to speak. And of course, it talked about what I was interested in at the time. And then I went back later on in my life, and they had a different prophecy, and they were like, this is who you're going to marry, and this is what you're going to do. And at that time, I was, seeing my ex-husband, whom I knew for many lifetimes. And the part of me, just the sky priestess, just kind of went, no, and the part of me who was still Bhairavi Balasubramaniam, trying her best to stay loyal to the roots of a culture, was like, but. So I go there and I'm praying my heart out. I'm just like, please, someone give me a sign. So I go to this place. And then they say, this is the guy for you. You're going to have all kinds of gods talking to you. You're going to be known for this, and this. In your next life, you will come back as a Brahmin boy and be the representative of this great sage. And I'm looking at this going, okay, right. All right, cool. So you know what? At that time, I was still trying to fit within that system and structure. So I went along with it. And then I found out that he was the world's biggest narcissist. But then again, I think everyone in a relationship with a covert communal narcissist would say that. And I rejected it. And even those people who were trying to sell me this stuff, they were really desperate to kind of get me as a representative of their craft. And they were trying to work their way into, at that time, the family of origin, and convince me to go back and to fulfill their prophecy. And I was just like, no, it's not going to happen. And when I walked away from that, I could actually see a lot of the false light that had been kind of pushing me in the wrong direction in my life and literally just giving me wrong intel. And I found that there were, and I was thinking about, should I say this? Should I not say this? Is this why I keep getting all these weird, sometimes overt, sometimes passive aggressive attacks from Indian people? And I figured, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to say it. So I did. And this was my journey. It didn't work for me. And the people who are drawn to me now from the subcontinent are people who have gone to the similar sources of searching, have had similar experiences, and have kind of gone, I have done everything right. Why is this not working for me? So, and maybe it does work for some people, but I don't think it works with someone who wants to work with the age of Aquarius. Because if you think about it, even in terms of that astrological system, like if you actually go to the temples, some of which were probably built by my damn ancestors, So I go there and I see that, as with every Hindu temple, they're in a black grid of 9 by 9. Not a single planet is female, not a single one. And I've always seen this as a kid, and I've just been like, is that right? So you get contained in this grid by 9 by 9. It creates an artificial matrix by trying to, get the energies of planets together, and it has no representation of the actual feminine. Of course, that is that. But would they actually allow a female priestess? No. So this is where you got to see that there is a big disjunction between the practice of a religion, the practice of astrology, and what people sell to you by ways of the large glittering philosophy. And that's what gets exported over and over and over and over again. So this is why I don't get along with it. It doesn't seem to actually match the energies that we actually need. And this coming from someone who's been to all the right places, sat there, meditated in places no one's even heard of, communicated with a bunch of things, and kind of gone, not happening for me, man. Thank you, but maybe this is for someone who's willing to sit in that box. So that's one of the biggest things in my journey. That's one of the biggest things in my journey, and that honestly opened me up to um, being able to do my job better. But this is also where because I was thinking about it, I'm like, this was honestly the same thing that happened to me on Facebook. The same thing. Wasn't white people who hated my guts, wasn't exactly people of color, unless I had accidentally said something that offended them, as in people of African descent. Wasn't Hispanic people, wasn't Chinese people. It was always Indian people. And this is where part of me is like, in one point I wanted to live there because my ancestors came from there. And it was like I just couldn't. Because the more you kind of live in that very 3 by 3 black square reality, which is what that particular astrological system is, the less you're likely to break out of it. I mean, I have a friend who recently got married, and she asked me to look at a chart, and I've always kept an eye on that family. I do this for people. There's some families that I'll just keep an eye on, and I'm able to afford it. And just comes up. And I was saying, but why are you doing this now? And then I saw how she got bullied and coerced by her family because they went to some old Indian Vedic astrologer dude who said, no, 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 she's going to have a Saturn return. That's terrible. No, she can't do that. And then I'm like, excuse me, that is literally when you can do some of your best work. Of course, they didn't listen, but we'll see what happens there. But it's not just having a reading. It's you're going to bring shame to your family if you don't do this. Or if you don't do that ritual, you're going to go and endanger this and endanger that. Believe me, as someone who did everything of that, didn't work. I actually find that a lot of the energy there, when I step into a temple these days, a lot of the energies usually come up to me, and then I end up sitting there going, okay, so this is your actual history. You got plundered here, you got burnt there, the priest stayed doing your prayers, right, and your actual statue is missing. I went and did that at Madurai Meenakshi Temple in Tamil Nadu. I went and I was so furious. I went straight up to the priest and I just asked him, where the heck is the real statue? And he was stunned. And then I was actually with a guy who knew the written history of the temple, and he was like, yeah, they actually took it. There was this huge great emerald statue, and in the British era they took it. Nobody knows where it is. How do I know this? I don't know. It just happens. So this is why I don't go to temples to pray anymore. I can't. I keep seeing where, the energy has been layered, has been co-opted, has been distorted, so much so that I end up doing work there, as opposed to me, getting a benefit from it. So, and when people uncritically go into these spaces, as someone who has done it for years, you're just feeding an old system. You're honestly just feeding an old system. And you know what? I'm sure it's not just Hinduism. I'm sure it's every religious system there is. And I'm not going to speak on other systems because I was not raised in that cultural context. I can only tell you what now. So if you're interested in it, please do yourself a favor, stop reading the internet and go back to original research books. Look at the actual myths behind the creation of whatever it is that you're looking at. A lot of people romanticize Shiva and Parvati. Okay, great. So basically, Chick is a princess, goes and lives with this dude who's off somewhere, getting high, hanging out with his ganas and friends, and literally kills the child that she makes for herself by chopping his head off, who then becomes a god. And you're expecting me to see this as a model of relationships. This is something I felt for years because it's just like, no, that doesn't work. So then people go, okay, you don't like that? Try going for Kali. It's like, okay, fine. So you look at the goddess Kali and you see that they basically launch her when there's something that they can't defeat. And what happens is that when they realize she's kind of getting drunk on the blood of demons and is in full bloodlust, then they either send her husband to lie down and she's supposed to stand on him and go, oh, my husband, a baby Bhairav. They send a child to go and calm down a raging goddess who is basically nearly full demon by that point because she's drunk the blood. That is also part of the myth. And tell me how that is not simply a restatement of patriarchal conditioning. Please tell me how. So that's why I get pissed off. But most of the time I don't say it. Just because, I've been thinking about saying this for a while. I'm just like, should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I? But you know what? Like I said, screw it. We're talking about it. How do you expect to find liberation from a deity that is being rhetorically, ideologically contained by her husband or by her child? At which point in that narrative do you actually see the anger of the feminine as sacred rage, and rather than, instead of what it's being used for, as an instrument by, a larger collective understanding of this is what femininity is? This is what I saw in India, that when you go to the land and the actual indigenous energy of the land, and by the way, Vedic Hinduism is not indigenous. There are all the tribal energies and tribal forms of worship that got sidelined. You have to go to a hill somewhere to find it. And even then, it's already been Sanskritized. So, this is the kind of energy that when people think this is India and this is Hinduism, I go, honey, you need to go look at anthropology and linguistics because it's not. And I'm someone who used to go and look at those hills and see what's there and, what's going on. And of course, they've tried to contain this, which brings me to Lakshmi. I know a lot of people are like, yes, I want a daughter like Lakshmi. Lakshmi will bring me wealth. All right, fine, cool. Did you know that there's A-Lakshmi? There's Lakshmi and A-Lakshmi. A is a prefix that is used to kind of negate something. So there's Lakshmi, who's this golden, lovely being who's going to give you this, who goes and sits next to a husband and is very nice and docile and domestic. Okay, fine. But there is also her elder sister, who is supposedly unkept, wild, misfortune. Things aren't neat, things aren't orderly. Literally, it's a lobotomization of the feminine, and people worship this lobotomization. Do you know how it is for someone like me to go sit at that, look at that, and go, and yeah. Will anyone else tell you this? No, they will not, because it'll lose them money. It'll probably make them more enemies. And people are going to be like, who the fuck are you to, rethink and actually use your brain when looking at these archetypes? And I'm going to go, who am I not? That honestly do not help a person move into a different level of consciousness. That being said, like I said, there are some traditions that are very, very feminine centered, but they take a heck of a lot of discipline to follow. This is the thing about it. Hinduism is very effective as a metaphysical science. Every damn thing they do is science. But that science, without a moral, spiritual, and political core that is truly aligned with the feminine and with the planet, is just going to become a constriction. Try telling this to a priest who will literally not touch you because he's of a different caste, and if he touches you, he's polluted. Try telling that to someone doing that in a temple. That is not going to work. Now, does this mean that there are no gods and goddesses? Of course there are. There are lots of energies there. And there are lots of indigenous energies there, but you're not going to find it when you just come from up here and you read the nice, pretty stories and you look at the nice, pretty concepts, and you're just going to go, there's a disconnect here. There's a disconjunct here. Now, millions of people are going to disagree with me. That is fine. Absolutely, completely fine. But millions of people are also not necessarily that interested in discerning and false light, and they're not necessarily that interested in working with the age of Aquarius. For all those people, is as long as I have money, my children are married off well, that's all I need. So there's a conflict there. And, I've been thinking to myself, should I say it? Should I not say it? Should I say it? Should I not say it? Like my piece with Therius the Hunter Stalker, it took me 4 years before I finally said that. And, the reason why I'm saying it now is because it just needs to be said. I mean, seriously, let's not even get into the mapping of, that disconnect that you see between the politics of the land and the current religion of the land. And again, I'm not saying this doesn't happen anywhere else, but well happens in India. So, I know a lot of people see me because this is brown. They look at the name and no, I didn't choose the name. I didn't take it on as a spiritual name. I was born a Bhairavi. Bhairavi is the goddess of death and destruction and the most potent form of Kali, whose job it is to go and break shit apart when it needs to be broken. That's literally my name. But I didn't ask for it. It happened. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm just doing what I was supposed to be doing. So, when someone asks me, so how do I reconcile this culture and this cultural system with what's happening in the world right now? Honestly, I don't have an answer to that question. All I know is the more you get refined in frequency, the more you actually pay attention to what is happening around you, the less you will actually want to go into these kinds of ritualistic forms of magic. Or even forms that create this very arty energy of spirit itself. So at the end of the day, I'm always a fan of the indigenous. Of course, they've got their own versions of negative energy and shadow work to do, but it's organic. Now, one of the things that really has always disturbed me in India is, and you see this in the north, you see this in the south, you see this everywhere, the moment they abuse a woman, mistreat her, let's say she dies horribly or under mysterious circumstances, what they do is they stick a stone there and they call her a goddess. And they start worshiping it. And I can't tell you how many places there are, probably thousands. So instead of actually letting the soul go to a next level of its consciousness, be purified of its trauma, it then empowers a soul that is not quite integrated, that has not quite healed, and gives it divine to quasi-divine status. That is what happens there. And you ask me, is that a right thing to do? I'm going to go, maybe not. But this is also what happens because people have forgotten that there is a link between spiritual technology and the ethics of spirituality. There needs to come, both of these need to happen together. So when people are trying to go back to Hinduism and the Vedic understanding, they're looking at the technology, but they are not looking at the heart and the spirit that needs to go in it. And of course, it wasn't invented there. I don't care who's going to get pissed off about this, but this is the kind of energy that was existing in far older cultures as well. We just don't have any archaeological record, but the people who remember. So, and I would not be surprised to see the same thing in other cultures, in other parts of the world. But this is the only thing that I can see in myself that has not been acknowledged, which would be triggering all these Indian people who are just like going, who are you? Who the hell are you? And I'm like, why? This is the only thing that I have not yet acknowledged, which I was thinking about, but eventually I feel like, yeah, let's just put this out there and hopefully that crazy stops. It's very clear that I don't, sing from the same songbook anymore. I mean, please do yourselves a favor and actually look at the research on the female figures in any spiritual tradition that you want to follow. And no matter how sweet it is, thinking about her with her plaits, with her flowers in her hair, and how she absolutely adores her Lord and Savior, please ask yourselves, is this the path that the divine are looking for? Because that's certainly not going to work for me. But having said all of that, let's get into the comments. Let's see what's happening. Da, 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 da. Okay, first of all, hello everyone. I don't have time to go into individual hellos today, but hello everyone, it's good to see you. The notifications have actually worked for once. Great. Davi wants to know of what you think of Ayurveda. I think Ayurveda is a fantastic system, but please look at the energies that the person is invoking when working with it. And Black says, hello family, hello and Black, and hello and happy new moon to everyone. Hopefully this, gets this karmic target off my back. Valerie asks, is your dissertation available anywhere to read? Yeah, just type in Bhairavi Balasubramaniam thesis parliament. You will find it online. Let's see. Alchemy says, triggers are a beautiful opportunity for growth. I'm grateful to provide them, but with the understanding that is how they work with those triggers is their choice. Pretty much. People go, oh, you're triggered. I'm like, yes, that means I have to do something. They go, oh, you're triggered. That means you're not spiritual. Bullshit, and more bullshit. Look at your triggers, figure out what shit you need to do. And someone was going very nicely, but it's something unhealed in you. No, it's not. Sometimes a trigger happens just because you have a job to do or because there's something that you need to acknowledge. And this is what I'm doing. Enough with the trigger shaming. Dream Life Tarot goes, wow, this is part of what happened to Buddhism. It came from the same root, honey. Raquel says, hello, Bhairavi. I'm so glad I caught you live. Glad. Send your little girl a hug from me and your other little fellow. Okay, let's see. Dream Life Tarot asks, can you please say the name of the 9x9 place, 3x3. I keep saying 9x9, 3x3 place. That's actually in every Hindu temple ever. Ever. Let's see. VB says, hello, VB. Going to speak to you later today. Right. Sheena says the disconnect has been something I've been tracing and trying to figure out. Seeing within other parts of the world helps. I am glad. Okay. Lumi says this is mind-blowing. It all makes much sense. I've not heard anyone else say this. Of course they won't. Of course they won't. Let's see. Luna says, great way to spend a Saturday night. Greetings. Greetings to all of you. I'm happy this helped. I really am. I again, it's going to work for some people, but it just doesn't work for me. Where I remember reading, even just look at the charts. All right, instead of just going, oh, this is so beautiful. Please look at the charts. Actually read the meaning of them. Read the meaning of them and ask yourself, what is the politics behind that statement? Understand that everything that we humanly speak and say came out of a human being at some point. All right. It's very easy to say it came out from some divine energy. No, someone had to write it down. And as you are filtering it and writing down, it is filtered through a particular social, political, spiritual, gendered context. And remember that context. Please understand that there's also a huge problem. Female infants who get killed in the womb. There's a huge problem with caste and untouchability. It's still happening in India. The system is still creating an unequal gendered balance, or one in which a woman cannot be a priestess just because she got menstruate. Please ask yourself whether or not it actually tallies. I know it's really nice and comforting to think about this is the fixed universe. It's all been written. It's all been done. Yes, I know that might give you a sense of stability, but you have to ask yourself, is it actually true? Does it match your reality or not? And now, having said that, there are many energies that, of course, will be very, very greatly wanting to sit in your belief systems. And there are many, as I have said, there are many copies of energies that are calling themselves divine. They don't like it when I see through them. But they are also very effective. So you can still work with the same systems, just you can still work with the same system. Just know that that's not your ultimate connection to reality. Reality, God, divinity, whatever you want to call it, does not require hierarchy. It does not require ritual. It does not require a damn thing. It just needs you to show up. It just needs you to show up. And that's about it. So I send all of you much love, many blessings. Prepare for the backlash at the end of this video in the comments. But I can only tell you what my personal experience. So, okay. So you maybe next time keep your questions for an actual hello neighbor. I didn't know what I was going to be talking about today, but this is what came out. So new moon, I have showed up. What you gonna do about it? Ciao ciao for now. Bye bye, sweeties.